好，各位观众，欢迎大家今天收看《世界同桌》。在我们今天的世界同桌里面呢，我们请来了我的 Professor Thomas Zweifel。那么我们已经有18年没有见面了，这一次呢是第一次跟他见面。Okay, now let's invite Professor Zweifel. How are you, Professor Zweifel?
I'm good, and I agree with everything you said, even though I understood nothing.
So I guess this is a global leader. So I'm so excited to reconnect with you again. It's been 18 years.
18 years, and
Yes.
you have done amazing things. I'm so proud of you. You know, what you've built in these 18 years. I know some of it came from our leadership class at Columbia,
Yes.
but how you've used those tools and how you made something really meaningful, it's just fantastic. I'm very proud.
So because I follow you, I remember I learned the most is the communication in your class. So I figured this was my strength. So right now I'll be able to use the communication tool to serve the world better. But today we're here to learn from you. So I'm so curious, what makes you to go to the global leadership at the first place?
Okay, I think that my desire is always for people, and first of all, myself, I started with myself, to be self-determined. And I think that's one of the most important leadership qualities, is to be self-determined, which means to not be enslaved by your boss or by your relatives or by somebody in the past, to be totally your own master.
Hmm. And you start teaching at Columbia University since 2000, right? And you have been teaching for
Yes.
many years. And you have to training many leaders in this world. What is the experience you learn from your teaching experience as a global leader?
I have to say what they don't learn first, okay?
Okay.
What people do not learn, and I don't believe in this, is that there's a certain set of qualities that you have to have as a leader. And if you don't have those qualities, you cannot be a leader. Number one, I think what people learn is that everybody can be a leader, and it's not a question of the qualities that you have. Of course, you may need integrity, you may need humility, you may need confidence, but those are not the decisive things. The greatest leaders basically followed certain conversations, and I believe in what I call the global leader pyramid, which is basically a pyramid of 5 layers, and maybe you will show the pyramid at some point.
Yes, right here, I'm showing right now.
Oh, fantastic. And those are the 5 layers are basically self-awareness, where you become clear about who you are, who you're not, what your strengths are, your weaknesses, your values, where you become really yourself and you understand yourself. Then the second layer is relationship, where you build trust with other people. And sometimes in the West, the trust and the relationship have been undervalued. I think that's something that in China, that's very valued. And in India also, for example, in Latin America, also in the Arab countries, the value of shared interests and relationship and trust. Then you go to vision, where you build the future. Then you go to strategy, where you look at how can we deliver the future, and then it's action. And so basically what I found is that the greatest leaders did not have certain qualities, but they had certain conversations, because each of those layers of the pyramid is a conversation. It's a conversation that builds trust, like the conversation we have right now. It's a conversation that builds a vision or builds a future and that inspires people. It's a conversation that makes things doable and feasible. And then finally, it's a conversation that produces action. I will ask you, can you please get me water? And then you get me water, and that's an action. Or I can make a promise. Like Churchill said, I promise you nothing but blood, sweat, and tears, but we will have victory over the Germans, over the Nazis, right? So that was a promise, if you will. So all of these are conversations, and no matter what qualities you have, if you're great at these conversations, you can be a great leader.
So can I say that in order to be a great leader, the way to communicate is most important in the communication?
Absolutely. That is absolutely right. And that's the essence. I always say that communication is the water that leaders swim in. It's like the water. You have to be a great communicator, no matter what else you want to produce, if you cannot communicate your vision, for example, or if you cannot communicate in a way that people think it's doable, that they can succeed, right? They can be successful, they can make a lot of money, or they can achieve their goals. If you cannot communicate in that way, or if you cannot communicate in such a way that people trust you and want to follow you, then you're not a leader. So a leader has to be a great communicator, and I'm so glad that you pulled that out. That's very important.
Yes. But some people might thinking, why if some leaders can only just talk? They can communicate very well, but they just talk and talk and talk. So how to translate that to leadership? How maybe we should learn that not just communication, but also take that to the action, and action may be part of the communication.
Yes, absolutely. And action is, again, action is also a conversation, right? So if I want to produce an action by somebody else, I need to make a very bold request, to basically say, I want you. So I might make a request of you and say, I want you to mobilize your followers in China to become leaders, right? And I want you to create 1 billion leaders in China, for example. That's a pretty crazy request, right? And then you can say yes, or you can say no, or you can say, no, I will not produce 1 billion leaders, I will produce 500 million. And then I say sold, So either way, by making bold requests and bold promises, that is a conversation for action, and that produces action. But I want to mention one other thing about communication. As you pointed out, it's not just what you say, and great leaders are not just great broadcasters, that they speak very powerfully. They also have to be great listeners. Because if I can listen to you and listen for your greatness and listen for what you want, for example, what would give you a future, then the listening is as important as the speaking. And I'm doing a lot of speaking in this interview, but it's kind of misleading, because a lot of my work as a leadership coach, for example, or as a leader even, is to listen to people, because when I listen to them in the right way, they become very powerful, and they can unfold their full potential in a way.
But then sometimes when we say we listen to people, but then everybody have different need. If you listen to A, then B going to be upset, or C going to be angry, right? So everyone have different perspective. So how are we going to listen to everyone's point of view?
That's the challenge. Once you figure that out, please let me know, because I don't know yet. But all I can do is I can select the people that I think have the potential to be amazing, to be leaders, and then to listen to them. And if somebody gets upset, then I have to deal with that, right? Then I have to talk to them and reestablish the trust, and see why they're upset, and then make sure that they're trusted. I'll give you an example. President Clinton, Bill Clinton, when he was president, I was very privileged to meet with him. And I have never met a human being who was so powerful in listening to people. He literally made you feel like you're the only person in the world. And that's the kind of listening that I'm thinking about. And that doesn't mean I have to listen to the same person for a year. I can listen to them for maybe a minute, and it makes them feel important, and makes them feel appreciated, and it makes them feel that their voice counts, right? And then I can go to the next person. So
I totally agree with you. I also met him during the time I was in Columbia University. I remember after I met him, the line behind me, I thought he was going to say hi, hello, and then pass, hello. It's not. He was me to talk for almost 10 minutes, and people out behind just keep waiting. Wow. He made me feel very important the whole time. So I think, like you said, as a leader, you need to listen to people, but maybe not necessarily talk to everyone, but talk to those that you believe that has the potential to changing the world for better.
Exactly. And it's not like you have to listen the same way to every person. I show this in the book. I just want to show my book, Communicate or Die here. I don't know what the translation is of the title in Chinese, but the subtitle in English is getting results through speaking and listening. Right? So the listening is just as important, and maybe even more important. And it doesn't mean that I have to listen for greatness with every single person. For example, if I get an ad by email or on WhatsApp or on Instagram or whatever, or on WeChat, I don't necessarily have to listen to that ad and say, oh, wow, that's amazing. I may listen to it like I'm ignoring it, right? So I will not listen to this. The key is to listen at the right level. Sometimes I have to listen in a way that controls the person and what they can say. By the way, if I look at my watch, then the person will immediately think, oh, I better hurry up, right? So that's a way of controlling through the listening. Or I could listen just one-to-one, like really listen to the content of what the person is saying, regardless of whether they're yelling or whether they're saying it very quietly. If I could just listen to the words and then recreate the words, that I call that respecting. Okay, so there's basically 8 different layers of listening, and the mastery comes from listening at the right level to each person. And some people simply don't deserve to listen for their greatness because they say stupid things. So not everybody deserves to be listened to the same way.
I remember there's another way of a communication that you taught us in the class. I remember when our class was so many people like talking, and then we asked you one question: what if during the time we give a speech, people are speaking and loud, don't listen to you, and you show us that just stand there not talking, just stand there quietly. Wow, suddenly the whole class become very quiet. See, you did not speak anything. You just sit there, you actually just stand there. That's a form of communication as well, without speaking.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And the way I would say this, and I actually learned this from Martin Luther King, the civil rights activist, Dr. King. Obviously, I never met him personally, but I watched his speeches and I studied how did he do it. He was speaking in Washington to 200,000 people, right? And at first he had his prepared remarks, and it was kind of like a normal speech, normal thing like he usually did in church. And there is a moment, and you can watch this on YouTube. There's a moment after 11 minutes in the speech where he suddenly becomes aware, I'm talking to 200,000 people, and they have dreams, and they have hopes, and they have fears, and they have concerns. And he deviated from his speech. And he actually, like you just described, he stood there and then he started speaking to their listening. Rather than just saying the stuff that was there, that he had prepared, he deviated, he went away from his speech and he spoke to the listening. And I call that mastery, because that's really listening to the listening while you're speaking. Can you listen to the listening? What do people need to hear at that moment? What are their concerns? What do they most want in that moment? What's their desire? And when you speak to that, they will buy whatever you say. It's a very powerful method. And I learned it from Martin Luther King.
Wow. Who else you learn from? The top leaders in the world. I want to learn that too.
Well, actually, I learned from some Chinese philosophers. I learned a lot. In fact, we're building a course, leadership course, which we may speak about later, which actually uses some of these principles that I learned from Lao Tzu. For example, this is one of the most powerful, inspiring sentences, and it's in the beginning. It's a motto of almost all of my books, and it's basically, I don't know if I can recreate it. It's basically when the best leaders, nobody notices their existence. The next best are appreciated, the next best are feared, and the worst leaders are hated and despised. But when the best leaders' work is done, the people rejoice and say, we've done it ourselves. And that's Lao Tzu. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Lao Tzu, I guess. And it's basically that the best leaders are invisible, that you don't even know that they're leading. That is the highest level of leadership, where the people are so empowered that they are the leaders. And that became my leadership definition. You know, you asked me a while ago, what's my definition of leader? And my definition is, can you be somebody around whom people are the best they can be, and they will achieve their goals and they will be successful? And whether you are noticed or whether you get credit as a leader, that's not so important, right? Ultimately, it's about them. It's not about you. And that's what leadership is, or what leadership should be. Unfortunately, in the world, there are a lot of leaders who do not live from that principle, right?
Yeah, I noticed that that's difference between the West leadership and the Eastern leadership. I also read that part of the book, actually, and inspired me. He said, when you lead behind, so nobody shoot your back. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you can combine the East and the West leadership, I think this world might become a better place.
Yes, I absolutely agree. You know, by the way, another leader that I learned from is Confucius.
Yeah.
You know, because I think whether you intervene, like I would say, Confucius would say, you have to intervene sometimes, right? Or whether you don't intervene, like Lao Tzu. Either way, Confucius would say you have to do everything you do with goodwill, right? It always has to be a good intention, that you don't want to destroy people. You want to help people. You want to build people up. You don't want to negate them or put them down or make them small, right? So I think that has to be the motivation behind all leadership, because leadership is like fire, right? I mean, you could use leadership to destroy people. And some people do this, you know, they use their leadership for bad purposes. And you would want to be a leader who wants to build something, who wants to leave a legacy. And I guess that's the question that I would ask everybody in this interview, or who's listening or watching this. You know, what kind of legacy do you want to leave in the world? What do you want to leave behind? You know, God forbid, when you pass away, when you die, what will be the legacy that you leave behind in the world? And it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You know, it could be that you leave behind a family and children that have certain values, you know, or it could be that you build a totally new product, or it could be that you help a lot of people. But I think every person has a purpose, or should have a purpose in life. And then it's not a question, you know, are you a leader, but what kind of leader and what kind of legacy are you leaving behind? What do people say about you when you're not there? That's the legacy.
Yes, I also think about that before a long time ago, but now I changed a little bit, Professor.
Good.
I changed
That's
a little
good.
bit. I try not to.
How did you change it? What was it before and what is it now?
I think when I was in Colombia, I want to leave a legacy. I want to set up fun. I want this, I want that, I want this, but become I centralized. But now, after all this 18 years, I start changing to without I'm selfless. I want to know we can do together. You become better because me. If neighbor better becomes me. Like I try to start from small, because sometimes we think too big. That becomes ego-driven leadership.
Yes.
I become
beautiful.
As a show. But now I'm changing. Before I'm the star, but now I'm changing that my audience is a star. I'm just behind to make them a star, make them to realize potential, realize their own leadership. That's what I learned from you.
That is absolutely beautiful. And you know, this is the essence of my leadership approach, if you will. And I learned this from Jack Welch. You know, Jack Welch used to be the CEO and chairman of General Electric, one of the most successful business people of all times. And he said once, when you're a young leader, it's all about you. You know, it's all about, can I do it? Am I good enough? I hope I'll be good enough to achieve the goals. I hope I don't mess it up, you know. But when you become older and a little bit more mature, it all becomes about the other people. You know, how can I make sure that my team becomes amazing? How can I be sure that every follower becomes a leader and can be their potential? And so it also has to do with maturity. And the other thing, the other dimension, what you called up when you said this, my approach is really co-leadership. So it's not leadership from above, top down. It's that the world has become so complex that no individual can master everything. Okay, so we need each other. We need to be amazing together. It's no use if I'm great and you're not great. I have to have all of them great, all people around me, and then I can achieve the things that I want to do. So that for me is leadership. It's really co-leadership. Another way of saying it would be coaching leadership, right? But co-leadership is really the word I use.
So you're the leader's leader. So I can say.
Yeah, exactly. It's a leader leading leaders, you could say.
I thinking that we learn from Colombia or a peers like that we leave a legacy. What do you want? It's good because that's how we become who we are. We learn from each other who we are. But then to a certain point, you suddenly realize, okay, that's what I can do for others. Just like right now, I can do through this, like WeChat or Zoom with a global leader together. So I feel powerful. And I think everyone to learn step by step. First, learn about who they are, what the legacy they want. But then the next step is what can empower other, what can other can benefit from you because you. I think that's a leadership that I learned.
That is absolutely beautiful. And, you know, it reminds me, we were talking about the global leader pyramid earlier.
Yes.
And you remember the middle section is vision, right? So obviously, everybody knows that vision is a very important part of leading, right? You have to inspire people with the future. That's what leadership is, right? It's to lead them to the future. And I used to think that vision is basically the answer to the question, what do you want, right? So if I ask you, what do you want? And you say, you know, I want to be rich, I want to be a bestseller author, I want to be XYZ. But then eventually it became less, what do I want? And it became more, what does life want from me? It's a very different question, right? In the first question, what do I want? It's basically about me. It's about my material stuff. You know, I want more of this. I want to drive a Jaguar or whatever. But if I ask, what does life want from me? Life wants something from me. I'm on this planet, like Rabbi Zusha, I'm on this planet to achieve a purpose, to have a mission. What is my mission? That's uniquely mine. Why am I on this planet, right? That maybe to create something that has never been done before by anybody else. And I will do it now. And it could be small, it could be big. That's really up to each person, right? Yes. To decide.
Yeah, so I think the first level, know who we are, what kind of legacy we want, and then build relations with people, right? And how to, the relations build trust. So how to build trust, how to build good trust relations.
Okay, the very simple, since we don't have a lot of time, the very simple answer to this question is you do two things if you want to build trust. Number one, you make a promise. Number two, you keep the promise. If you do those two things, that builds trust. Very, very simple. Okay, so I can promise you something. I will send you XYZ book by Friday or whatever, right? If I keep the promise, you will trust me a little bit more. If I don't keep that promise, then it's like, he talks, but he doesn't really keep his word, right? So that builds trust. And you could also say that that's integrity, right? Integrity is basically to honor my word. So if I give you my word for something, you should be able to count on my word.
Okay.
And if I cannot keep my word, because sometimes I cannot keep my word, right? Sometimes, for example, if I say my promise is to build 1 billion leaders, I'm not sure if I can do that, right? So there may come a time when I say, you know what, I don't think I can do it. And then I can still communicate and say, you know what, I will not keep that promise. So that's also okay, right? That's honoring my word. But the worst thing you can do is to make a promise and then ignore that you made that promise. Even in the UN, in corporations, where people make promises and then they pretend that they never said anything and the other people pretend, and then you have a mess. Then you have a team that doesn't deliver. Or in the UN, they said, we got these Millennium Development Goals or whatever they're called, Social Development Goals. And now nobody really knows. Or like environment goals, right? So by 2050, we're gonna cut to 2% global warming or whatever. I forgot the numbers. And now it's like nobody knows. Are we on track? Are we keeping our word or not? So in my view, this is one of the great challenges of our time. Can we live up to our word? Can we give our word and actually keep our word instead of just pretending that we never said anything? And that for me is the definition of integrity.
Yeah, so it's very important. Being a good leader, they need to have a good integrity. And then you said, then we communicate our vision. So after we have vision, we have strategy, and then
we have strategy.
Yeah.
And then action. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So now I have a question for you. I know that you have been helping many CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs, and you have helped like 3,000 CEOs in the world. And now,
not CEOs, 3,000 clients. Not all of them were CEOs. Okay.
Clients in the world, and then you help the company like have a lot of profit, 60% grow. What is the strategy that you're using to drive the profit go up?
Okay. Yeah, just to be clear, I was privileged to work with 40 different so-called Fortune 500 companies. Right, those are basically the biggest companies in the world, according to Fortune magazine. And I was able to work with 40 of them. And I would say that the one common thing, every single company is very different, right? So you cannot say everybody is exactly the same. That would be like McDonald's, right? So everybody gets a hamburger, but I think you have to tailor it to that organization, right? To their leaders, their opportunities, their market, their culture. But I would say one thing that's common to all of them is we use an approach called strategy in action. And basically what that is you get people in a room and you basically look at all of the leaders at different levels. And they may not be just the CEO, right? It could be obviously C-level people, but it could sometimes be people that are in other countries that are usually not seen. They're kind of invisible. You bring them to the table. You put them in a room from different functions, different hierarchy levels, different regions of the company. And so let's say you have maybe 20 or 30 people, and they get together in a room, and they literally don't leave the room until they have a shared understanding. So we basically roll up our sleeves and we say, okay, what can we say about this company? Okay, we got this many customers. We had growth. We had not growth. We are in these regions. We're trying to get a full picture of the company, which I call a shared understanding. So it's basically everybody sees the same picture, which usually doesn't happen, right? Usually it's like the proverbial elephant, right? So some people feel the legs and they say, this is like a column. And then somebody feels the trunk and they say, it's like a snake. And somebody feels the teeth, right? And that's like a totally different thing. But you have to stick with it until you have a shared understanding. Then you build a strategic intent, you build a vision together. And it has to be shared. It has to be aligned. Mm-hmm. And then you look at how you measure that. You look at what are the major strategic objectives. Then you look at who are the leaders that need to deliver this strategy. And then you do something very special, which is, I call it a catalytic project. It's a 100-day project. And you did this at Columbia, if you remember. Every student had a catalytic project, right? So basically, the idea of the catalytic project is you take a microcosm of where you ultimately want to be in 5 years or 10 years, and you deliver a breakthrough in that microcosm. So the microcosm is like a laboratory of action, and you produce a breakthrough result that shows you that the entire strategy is feasible. And then you step back after 100 days and you evaluate the project. Either it succeeded, in which case you can standardize it, institutionalize it, or it failed, in which case you should probably forget about it, or somewhere in between, right? So you achieved something, but not everything you wanted. Then you can see how you could improve it, or maybe you want to do another 100 days. But either way, you cannot lose because you did something in the action. And I'm a big believer in taking action. And you said this also earlier, that action is maybe the highest virtue of leaders, right? If there's no action, it's all theory. And that's why I call it strategy in action. You have to do it in action, and then people stop debating about it and having all these endless meetings where they have all these opinions, because the action will show either you get the result or you don't. And then you institutionalize and you scale up, and then you can create the next strategy that's based on this new landscape that you got out of the action. So basically, it's like, you create a little bit of strategy, 80%. It doesn't have to be perfect. I always tell that to my Swiss people, because Swiss people are very perfectionist, right? So I have to make sure that they start the action before it's perfect. So then you take the action, and then you step back again and do strategy, and then you do action again, and then strategy again, and that's how you work. And actually, when you look at a company like Amazon, for example, Amazon does this perfectly. I call them a strategic organization, because they constantly invent new business models, and then they take action, and then they create the new strategy. And they got into everything. They got into movies and books and cloud services and music. It's unbelievable what Amazon does. They got into publishing. Jeff Bezos is the owner of the Washington Post, right? So it's incredible what you can do with this approach.
Very, very good. I know that you have a program, 30-day CEO or leader training program. Can you please tell us more about that?
Lead in 30.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, it actually does what you said earlier, which is to combine the wisdom of the ages. So we took people like Confucius and Lao Tzu, but also leaders, from the Jewish tradition. We took leaders from the Christian tradition, from all kinds of cultures. For example, Alexis de Tocqueville is one of them, or Plato, the Greek, or Marcus Aurelius. And we distilled the best leadership secrets from them. And I assume that executives and leaders are usually very, very busy people, right? So they don't have time to read all these books. So we did it for them, and we basically cut the tall grass and distilled based on 35 years of leadership experience, what I think is actually the essence of leadership. What's the fastest way to become a leader? And now I got it down to 30 days, okay?
That's great.
And so this course basically allows you in 30 days, and you can be self-paced, you can do it at your own pace, but you could do it in 30 days, basically 1 hour a day, like you're learning a new language, right? You're learning the language of leadership. And at the end of 30 days, hopefully you will be a leader. And you can do that for a relatively small investment.
真的太好了。那么呢，Professor Zweifel 呢，他会有一个30天的一个 program 来 train 你成为一个领袖，然后怎么帮助你自己成为一个领导或者领袖，或怎么帮助你的企业能够赚钱，或帮助你怎么样带领你的团队。那么大家如果对这个项目有兴趣的话呢，可以加 JoJo Garden Living。那么这是我的微信。大家可以呢跟 Professor Zweifel 一起学习，那他已经帮助了世界500强，还有帮助国与国之间，还有联合国来培训领导力。 好，欢迎大家加入系的同桌。那么在此呢 ，so our time's almost up, but then I have a last question to ask you. First of all, I want to know what is the global challenge right now for the leadership, and what is your advice for these global leaders? And then second is, what is advice for the corporate leaders? And then the third is, what is advice for the young leaders? So now let's start from the first questions. What is the challenge in the global right now?
Okay, I would say that one of the challenges, I'm not sure it's the only one, but we're living in a very, very chaotic time, in a time that some people have called VUCA. VUCA is the acronym of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Mm-hmm. Okay, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So what it basically means is we don't know what will happen. I know that there's a Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. And I think that's what's really going on right now. We're living in very, very interesting times. It's a time of amazing change. And I think to be a leader and to be a visionary in this time, which means to basically have a very clear sense of where am I going, what's my mission in life, what do I want to accomplish, and to not be enslaved by the uncertainty and the complexity, but to keep on your track, if you will. I think that is probably the biggest challenge that we have. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you have to do, and you have to be still enough, whether you have to meditate or whether you have to be spiritual or whether you have to, read a book. I don't know. Some people light the candle. Some people become religious. I don't know what the path is. Every person has to choose what their path is. But I know we need to be clear. We need to be clear on our morality. We need to be clear on our ethics. We need to be clear on our moral compass. And not to be distracted by all the noise and all the messages and the social networks and all these things that ask us to buy something, to believe something, to vote for somebody, to go to get the new thing, whatever. Like, to be clear on who you are and to clear where you're going. I think that maybe is the biggest challenge. And now you have to help me with the other questions because I forgot.
Yeah. So I think I learned from you as a public sector leader, global leader, you have to know what's your visions, keep your vision. Sometimes maybe off track, but always go back to the right track is your vision, because the vision that you can mobilize people continue going this vision. So never forget the vision as global leader, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that vision can then become an anchor in the future. Because your boat is in the ocean, right? And there's wind and there's currents in the boat and like slamming the boat, right? You're in a storm in a way. But if you have a clear vision, it's almost like having an anchor in the future. You know where the harbor is, you know where you want to get to, and that will stabilize you in a time of uncertainty, I think.
Very good. So now the second question is, you have, like where you say you have coach many CEOs and Fortune 500 and organization. What is the common blockage that they have? Like, what is the common problem that they have?
Okay, number one, I would say that all organizations, and this is not my idea. Peter Drucker, who was a very big leadership theorist, unfortunately passed away. Peter Drucker used to say that all organizations are essentially the same. They all have to produce objectives, or they all have to achieve objectives or produce results through human beings, right? I mean, there's no organization that does it without human beings. Now, maybe eventually there will be AI and they will just be robots and they will just produce results without ever seeing a human being. That's possible. But so far, it's still organizations, and whether it's a government or whether it's a church or it's a military or it's a business or it's an NGO or it's the UN, it doesn't matter. All of them have to produce results through people, right? So what's the biggest challenge? In my view, the biggest challenge is that we as human beings tend to think from the past towards the future. right? So we think we were born and then we grew up and that was all in the past, and now we're in the present and now we have to go towards the future. The problem with that is that if you live from the past, you are kind of condemned to recreate the past. So you get the same over and over again. So the challenge that we have, can I create the future from the future? And I call that Merlin. Merlin was a wizard who advised King Arthur in the, you could say it's a kind of a fairy tale or an ancient wisdom. And Merlin used to live from the future to the past. So he didn't know why things happened, but he knew what would happen. We're the opposite, right? We think we know why things happened. Yes, I'm this way because my grandfather was, blah, blah, blah. My parents brought me up this way, and that's why I am this way, right? So the word because is like, it's because of the past, right? We think we know why, but we don't know what will happen. I would like to propose a new way where you actually come from the future to lead people to the future. And that's leadership.
Wow. So you put yourself there at the higher position first and then lead from future. From future, lead from now. From future, need now. Am I correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right. That's
and then produce results. So now I can see if you want to be a corporate leader, you have to produce result, right?
No question. No question.
That's the leadership. Okay. So now,
but that's not the only. Excuse me for interrupting, but that's not the only thing. Yes, you have to produce results, but the people who become CEO or become major leaders, they also have to live in the future. So, for example, if I want to be president, I have to act presidential now. If I want to be CEO, I have to think like the CEO now, right? I have to be way beyond my little job. If I only do my job, like I come to the office at 9 and I leave at 5 p.m., or even if I produce results, I have to grow beyond that and think about, like you were saying, think about the other people, think about the whole company, maybe even think about my society. Like to be a visionary, to be a leader means that to include other people and include as many people as possible. And that will automatically propel you to lead from the future. Because then the question becomes, what do I want for my society? What do I want for my family? What do I want for my company? Not just for me.
I see. So being is important, being the corporate leader. And then
yes,
now,
being is just as important as doing. Doing is very important, like we said earlier, right? Without action, nothing happens. But without being, you will take actions that may not be strategic or may not be consistent with the future that you want. Right? So the being will make sure that you have the right mindset and that you will take the right actions. And for that, you have to reflect. You have to see, is the action I'm about to take, is it going to really help the most people? That's what Mahatma Gandhi was asking, for example. Every action that you contemplate, think of a face in front of you of the poorest man in the world. Will it help him in some way? Is the action you're about to take going to help somebody?
So that's very important. Your action benefit others. Okay, that's very good leader. So now we are going to facing the new generation coming. And I want to know what is your advice for the new generation here. So how to be a future leader and what's the qualification that they need to have?
I guess I'm gonna go back to my own when I had more hair and not so gray hair. When I was 22, I took an action that was very very wise, and I actually didn't realize it at the time. It was kind of like by accident or by intuition. I bought a building. Okay, so I was 22 years old, and I I had to incur a lot of debt. Okay, so I went to the bank. In fact, I think my mother had to vouch for me in the bank, right? Because they wouldn't give me the money. I took a huge loan and I bought this building, which had, I think, 18 apartments in it. And that was one of the best things I ever did, other than marrying my wife, of course. And that created a foundation of wealth for me that allowed me all the things I did around the world to not have to worry about money, because there was always that pillow, if you will, or like that security in the background. And that was the foundation of what I have now. I'm very privileged to have been very successful. I don't need to work for money anymore. I work because I love it and because it's my future, not because I have to. And I think that was the defining moment. Now, I'm not saying everybody should buy a building, right? Especially now with the economy, it may not be the best move. But take a big risk and do something that will basically create a foundation for the future of success, whatever that is for you. Okay. And the second thing that I would say is, I made a vow at one point. I was very young. I think I was about 20 years old. And I said, I will always only do what I love. I will only do what I love. I will never do things that I don't like, okay? And I will always be paid for what I do. And with those two ground rules, I will only do what I love and I will always be paid for it. That kind of like carried me through my life. And I never really worried about money, because when you do what you love, the money comes. And you have to stand up for yourself sometimes and say, I'm worth it. I should be paid. I need to be paid for what I do, right? So with those two things, that defining action of buying a building, and then those two ground rules of I will always do what I love and I will always be paid for what I love or for what I do. Those two things, I think, is what I would advise the young generation.
Very good advice. I learned we always got paid from what we do. I learned something a little bit expanding myself, because sometimes the pay is not by the money. Okay. Sometimes the pay could be gift, or could be exchange service, or could be unconditional love. So I notice sometimes, for example, we give others, we might not give back right away, but we can give back 20 years later or much later that you never unexpected it. So after Columbia, I create a theory called JoJo Garden. A fortune theory is, as a young leader, just give your unconditional love. Just give. By the time you give, your talent show. And then people will automatically see your talent. They want your talent. They will hire you. So I create a point that to people that I told people that you should create a point that people must want you. They want you. They're afraid they cannot have you, and then offer you a lot of money. So that's
wow.
That's how I learned.
I love that. I think that's a brilliant principle. And by the way, it brings to mind a quote by Winston Churchill, who said, "You make a living by what you get. You make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give."
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. So after talking,
I've been trying to live that way, actually. On every phone call, every meeting, everything I say, I try. I don't always succeed, but I try to give more than I take.
Yes.
And I think I would never want to be a taker. I always want to be a giver.
Yeah, because when you give, then other benefit. When other benefit, we're leading well.
Yes, exactly. And I would say that those people who give, to them, it will be given, right?
Yes.
If I give you honor, you will honor me back. It's very simple, right? If I honor you, you will honor me.
Yes.
Those who honor people will be honored. for example.
I really like what you just said that remember you need to get paid for young people. You can just get paid to McDonald's. You can get paid from like wash car as long as you can make a living yourself. But once to a point that you don't need to depend on the living, you can just give unconditionally, right? So, but make
Yes,
sure
exactly.
you take care of yourself because once you're taking care of yourself, you can take care of others, you can take care of family, you can take care of society. But if you cannot take care of yourself, it's no way to be a leader. No way. So you have to take care of yourself first. That's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very important.
And then now I just learned from you when I'm talking to you is that you're very brave when you're only 22 years old and bought like 18 room buildings, right? That is very brave behave. Can you teach us how to be brave?
That's a tough one because different people have different relationship with risk, right? So some people see risk as an adventure and they love it. I happen to be one of those people. So I just, I like to take risks because it's just more interesting. And, I think you live only once. So as far as I know. But I can also respect that some people will be more risk averse, right? And a little bit more conservative. So each person has to find what is a risk that I can live with, that I can feel good about. But I would say, take a risk. I mean, basically just do it, do something that you haven't done before. Or, even this week, after listening to this broadcast, do something that may surprise you. Do something where you might get a no from somebody, where somebody said, what did he do? What did she do? That's crazy. Do something where you might fail, you might fall on your face and see what happens. Because, and that's what Teddy Roosevelt said, the former president, Teddy Roosevelt said, the arena belongs to the one whose face is marred in dust and blood. And it doesn't belong to the gray mice who know neither victory nor defeat. It's like, can you do something where you might fail, you might have a defeat, but it's way better than not playing at all. So I think the only mistake you could make, the only real failure is when you don't play. When you play, you either succeed or you fail, but either way, you're going to learn a lot and you're going to grow. And so ultimately, if you play the game, you cannot lose. The only ones who lose are the ones who don't play and who basically sit on the sofa because they don't want to leave the house because it's so scary. Those are the ones who get stuck. The ones who play are never stuck. They always grow.
Wow, this is a very, very, very good message that I learned today. So I really learned from your conversation again. I hope you continue to coach me to become doing successful. Also share more to come to our audience. So if I learned so much from you, but I learned if you have one more philosophy and one more to teach our audience today, what is that we can take home?
I would say this, and I can say it in one sentence. What you appreciate gives you power. So no matter what situation you find yourself in, whoever your boss is, whoever your parents are, whatever your life situation is, if you can appreciate it, in other words, if you can step back from it and say, why did life give me this situation? Okay, what can I learn from it? Or what's the message that life is giving me? Why did life put this boss on top of me that I really don't like so much, etc.? Or why do I have this daughter, who's difficult or whatever, right? So whatever you're complaining about, if you can step back from it and appreciate what it is that you can learn from this, or that how you can grow, or what life is teaching you with this situation, then you get power. Because then you suddenly are choosing this situation rather than you're the slave of the situation, right? So what you appreciate gives you power. And it's a beautiful thing. I assume this doesn't work in Mandarin or Cantonese, but the word appreciation in English has two meanings. It means to gain value, like the dollar appreciates compared to the renminbi, for example, or depreciates, but appreciate, right? It means it's growing in value. but appreciation also means to validate or to acknowledge, to recognize, right? So whatever you appreciate will grow in value. And that's what I would like to leave people with. That has been one of the great principles in my life, that I was able to use everything that came my way, and I was never reacting to it. I was always owning it, right? I was saying, oh, this is great that this is happening to me. I might feel terrible. It might seem like something terrible is happening to me, but if I can see the lesson, if I can see the value in it and appreciate the value, then it is valuable. And then I can use it for something great. So in a way, it makes me unstoppable.
Wow, that's very powerful. So today we learn and I learn is try to appreciate every situation that the God give us or whatever life throw to us, and appreciate the people we meet, appreciate every situation. That will grow the leadership skill. And on the way, keep communicate and leave behind.
Yes.
So can I just take away from you today? Good.
That's the essence. Thank you for capturing the essence. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate your time and hope you come back again. So 各位观众，大家要加我们的话，可以加我微信 JoJo Garden Living。那我们可以跟 Professor Zweifel 一起学习 leadership 30天的 leadership。好，我们下个星期再见。